Real quick before we dive in, Matt Gilhooly's book is out. Still Here, True Stories of the Moments That Changed Everything is available right now on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. Over 100 stories from guests on the Life Shift podcast, one listener trying to make sense of what all of these moments mean for the rest of us. If you've been listening to the Life Shift for a while, this book is what 4 years of conversations have been building toward. It's personal, it's honest, and it might be the thing you hand to someone who needs to feel a little less alone. Find it by searching for Still Here by Matt Gilhooly on Amazon for the paperback and ebook, or check the show notes for the links. And if you read it and it moves you, an honest review on Amazon helps more people find it. Now on to today's episode.
There's a version of strength that looks like kicking doors and running towards chaos. And there is another version that looks like sitting still long enough to feel what you've been avoiding. Dr. Tony Dice has lived both, from Navy SEAL to addiction to recovery and service. This is a story about redefining what it means to be strong when your old definition nearly destroys you.
I remember turning off my cell phone, like turning it off and pushing it under the bed and just using and hating what I'd become. Like, Matt, my whole life I've been trained to be a hero, my whole life. And my son needed me and I could not. I mean, it was, if you could hear a spirit break, it was.
You're listening to the Life Shift podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Dr. Tony. Hello, doctor.
Hey, Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I don't know why I said hello, doctor, but you know,
what's up, doc? Today. You didn't go with what's up, doc. There you go.
Do you go by Tony or you go by Dr. Dice? Or...
Dr. Dice is my handle on all my social media. So
okay,
yeah,
all right. But I can once in a while refer to you as Tony.
You can or Big D or Dr. D, whatever you want, man.
All right. Well, I'll try to stick to what actually is your name, and then we'll go there. So thank you for being a part of the Life Shift podcast today, or just wanting to join me in this very fulfilling journey that I have found for myself, and somehow been able to talk to so many people about these really important human moments. So thank you before we even get started.
Oh, thank you for the platform. And, you know, it's amazing to watch people who can really sense the feeding nature of this kind of service to others. It's admirable.
Well, thank you for that. And I will say, selfishly, it's been really healing for me as well to have a lot of these conversations and to discover, even though I think I knew on the surface, that we really have a lot more in common inside each other, you know, like with each other, than we do that, you know, sets us apart. So it's nice to kind of like get the confirmation.
It is. Someone very wise once told me, the emotions are all the same. It's the details that differentiate us.
Yeah, totally. So before we get into your specific story, maybe you could tell us who you are in 2026. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days? However you want to answer that.
All right. 2026, who I am. I am a loving father of 5. I'm married to a superhero of a wife. And I'm living in a wonderful home. I have 2 small orange kitties that I just adore. I take my kids on canoe trips in the dead of winter, and in the summer I try to do at least one family vacation with all the kids somewhere awesome. And so that's my social life. In my work life, I'm the owner of Bishop and Dice Defense. It's a veteran-owned small business, and our entire mission is to get out there and we sell tactics, training, uniform supply, whatever your police department, your fire department, your VA facility needs the first year. And on year 2, we bring in mental health services once you trust us. On top of that, I teach at Old Dominion University as a professor there in their counseling and human services department. I've also written a book that kind of outlines a new theory of recovery that I've employed over the last 10 years to help veterans, law enforcement, first responders, and high performers work through this thing called emotional compulsivity and addiction and mental health issues. So that kind of, if you want a 90-second blurb, that's who I am today. And I'm also, 15 years in recovery, which is a big part of my story today. So I'm here to share, and hopefully one person out there somewhere gets one thing they can grab onto and hold.
I love that. That is, sometimes it sounds so silly coming out of my mouth saying like my true goal with every episode is that set of ears that needed to hear that story that day just hits them in the right way. And
isn't it crazy how that happens? I mean,
yeah.
I remember, I do a lot of groups, a lot of group therapy, a lot of people all of a sudden spontaneously sharing something. And one person there, that is what they needed to hear, totally unscripted. And somehow the universe makes this happen, allows this to happen.
Yeah. And what's fascinating to me is I always go into it thinking, oh, the audience is really going to stick to this. Like, this is going to be the point that everyone connects with. And sometimes it's the most like minor word that maybe they heard 1,000 times from 1,000 other people, but this one time they're in the right time, right mind space to hear it, and it just clicks.
It's what they needed in that moment.
Well, It sounds like you're doing a lot of that for the world, which I think is so commendable and so important and so needed right now, especially in the space that you're in and that you operate in. I think it's just admirable, and I hope that it fills your cup as much as it probably is stressful at times.
I have found a lot of peace in the realm of being of service to others, and it's funny. I've always kind of operated in a sphere in my life, but it wasn't till I did it for the right reasons that it became actual feeding and healing.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think it's a great thing that as a man, you are doing this as well, because there is a lot, I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, there is the gender bias as it relates to emotions and feelings. And so I think it's important that you do that. And it's kind of the reason that I just spill the beans every time too. It's important.
Yeah. If you're a male out there and you would like to be outnumbered by female, I highly recommend you pursue a degree in counseling or human services, because every class you'll be in, you'll be outnumbered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's beautiful. And thank you for what you're doing for the world and the people in it. So let's get into your story. Maybe you can kind of paint the picture of your life leading up to this main pivotal moment, and however far back you need to go to kind of give us that before version of you.
And I'll breeze through the younger years, but I'm the oldest of 8 brothers and sisters, 8 of us, homeschooled up in the mountains of Northern California, little tiny town called Horse Creek, California, 89 people in our town. Small, isolated, remote. Yes.
And most of them were your family.
Yes, most were my family. And so when I turned 15, 16 years old, I was a hormonal teenager who realized this is not okay. And so I ran away from home. I ran away at 16, made it all the way down to Southern California, started going to school. And there's a junior college down there. I got my GED. And so I was 16 years old taking classes, which was just, I had an Indiana Jones hat on because he was my hero, and I'm walking around campus with a fedora, and it was a crazy time in my life. I changed majors a million times because I grew up with, G.I. Joes and Indiana Jones were my heroes, and I just wanted to be part of this amazing, crazy world. And there was one class that stuck out to me. It was an EMT class I took, and emergency medical technician. And I realized with this certification, I could be a hero. I could save someone. My dad died. I went back home up in Northern California to be with the family for a little bit. And there was a fire department, the Klamath River Hose Company. At first they took on volunteers, and then you could get a position on that. And in that job, I got to use my EMT cert, and I had to respond to emergencies. You had a pager you carried and a radio, and if a vehicle went off the road, I got to go as fast as I could to save the day. And I loved that job. I mean, it was so feeding being the hero. I did that for 2 years. I then transferred to Northern Siskiyou Ambulance, an ambulance company, because they got to go code 3, lights and siren to the scene, and then go code 3, lights and siren back to the hospital. And those guys were just, they were the man. I got to be that guy. And I love that. I love the camaraderie with the people. I love just the way we were a unit and we operated together. It was very feeding. I loved someone out there was having the worst day of their life, and they were dialing 911, and they were calling me and my team to come save the day. That was super feeding to me.
It was a lot of that drive because you wanted to be the hero and less of helping others.
It was less of service, even though that was a part of it. Yeah. But there was this drive to save the day. I got to be like I saw in the movies.
That can be really addicting.
It was. It was when there was an emergency over here, everyone else is kind of running away, and you're running towards it. When there was a structure fire, they're running away, you're running into the fire. And those were all things that were very much the adrenaline surge, very addictive. There was a law enforcement agency, a sheriff's office that was hiring, and I was getting ready to put in my paperwork to transfer because those guys got to carry guns and kick in doors, and I was getting ready to transfer. Yes. And my chief pulls me aside and he said, "Hey, Dice, what are you doing? Why are you just jumping around job to job?" And I asked him, "Well, what's top of the food chain?" And he said, without a pause, a Navy SEAL. And so I said, okay, I'll go do that. And I had not seen any Navy SEAL movies. I had not been dreaming about Navy SEAL, but he said it was the hardest, but it was the best. And so I went down to the Navy recruiter and signed up. And I went through boot camp. I went through BUDS and got to the SEAL teams. And all of a sudden, two things happened. I fell in love with this population of guys. They were, no joke, a tight-knit unit that they call it the brotherhood, very raw kind of. And those guys were serious operators, and we had a job to do, and it was just, you're going to save the day. It was everything like my whole life I had hoped it would be. This other side of joining the Navy was I had been drinking before, just kind of as I grew up, but all of a sudden drinking, like I turned pro in my alcohol use. What the Navy taught me was that if I had a problem, no matter what it was, whether it be I had a buddy die, whether I had my girl left me, whether my dog died, whether I got an advancement, whether I got a raise, good, bad, indifferent, elevate, separate, evaluate, whatever happened, drinking was a solution. Even if, Matt, you and I had a problem, our supervisor would say, "Hey, you guys need to go get a drink together," and we would work it out. It was the Swiss Army knife of emotions. It solved everything, and I loved having a tool for every emergency.
Not the healthiest of tools, but
yeah. I mean,
it was in that environment. It feels like there would probably not be a ton of space to not push down your emotions in certain events because you have to you have to be part of that brotherhood.
I mean, as an instructor now, looking into the military's relationship with alcohol, it's since going all the way back to 3000 BC. Every single fighting force has used alcohol as a component of its both morale and support, and it's never, ever functioned without it. Mm. So they go hand in hand.
Your upbringing is so interesting to me, and this is my own trauma speaking, I think. But do you think you were chasing that top tier hero thing for a particular reason? Like, were you trying to prove something to family? Were you trying to prove or chase? What do you think was underlying?
I think there are several things. One, my dad was an addict alcoholic, so I was also always trying to get his approval. There was one, there was they call it the Klamath River Days, which was a logging competition where you got to throw axes and set chokers. And I remember as a teenager, I won the whole competition for choker setting against grown men who did it for a living. And I remember seeing my dad very proud of me. And I don't remember that ever before or after seeing that. And that hit me hard. That coupled with my dad dying several years later, all of a sudden I I couldn't get that anymore, and I had to fill this role.
Yeah. No, I asked that only because like with my loss, and I felt that I had to be perfect for everyone else, because if I didn't, like my dad was going to leave, right? Because my mom left. If I'm 8, that's what a death feels like, someone abandoning you. And so I assumed that role. And so I had to be perfect. I had to be the best in class and do all these things or choose things. See, yours is a little different because you were choosing hard things. I was choosing things that I knew I could be good at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I didn't want to mess up. Whereas you were like, it sounded like you had a lot of confidence in yourself as well.
And I think that, being homeschooled in the middle of the woods, I don't get beat down by society and social interactions in high school. But also, there was my mom wasn't the best teacher. God bless you, Mom. I love you. But she would literally give us a book and say, learn or be stupid. And I was scared to death of being stupid. And I was very fear motivated to get this. And I never truly knew if I was falling behind society.
How about, where were you in your sibling list?
I'm number 1, the oldest.
You're the oldest.
I'm the oldest, yes. And I remember like if we were going across country on a long road trip, if we stopped at a gas station and I saw another kid my age, I would approach them and I'd ask them like math problems or history questions, trying to figure out if I was at their level. I was very, very concerned with being stupid or being behind everybody.
Yeah. But also, as being the oldest, it's almost like you have to set the standard for the younger ones. And so you have to be the best in order to set the standard.
That's true. You don't want to get dethroned by the younger ones.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you're in this Navy SEAL environment and you're following protocol, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, learning when to stop drinking, when to start drinking, how to sober up, how to run while the hangover.
Everyone was doing it.
Everyone was doing it. And there were crazy days. I was very hard charger. I loved my platoon. We deployed overseas, and this was pre 9/11. It was not an exciting time to be a Navy SEAL. And there was let's just say, if you don't give me a mission, I'm going to make one up for myself. And so I would get in a lot of mischief, and I was not getting in trouble, but I could tell my head shed was like, oh, what is Dice up to now? It was definitely, it was a handful. Yes, very much so. But my addiction was growing. I was drinking more and more, turning it on and off. And as the years went by, I was dabbling more with coke and ecstasy. And I could see the writing on the wall. I was not getting in trouble yet, but I was barely missing drug tests. I was getting a lot of, hey, Dice, don't come in today kind of warnings, giving me heads up. And because, drugs and military do not mix. It's playing a game of Russian roulette. So when my reenlistment came up, I had to choose between my passion to be a Navy SEAL, this job that I worked so hard for, or continue to drink and use. And it was amazing how that was an incredibly hard decision. There was no like halfway point. It was, and I chose to get out of the military, to give up on this Navy SEAL thing so that I could drink and use how I wanted. And
that question, that ask right there, though, is almost like, because like you don't have one without the other. So it's almost like you were living that full life. And now it's like, well,
I can only have one. Yeah. And right here, this moment when I got out of the military, that was one of the lines in my life, that this one here, the people who really love freedom. Everyone in America, we stand by all the freedoms that we hold, and we're very honored by them. And the ones who step to the line and serve our country, I don't think people realize when you do that, you give up most of your freedoms. You can't, you can no longer choose where you're going to live, who you're going to work with, who you're going to talk to, where you're going to travel to, where your family's going to live. All those freedoms you give up to serve in the military. And that's taxing on you. But what they don't warn you about is the day you get out, all those freedoms are returned to you in one day. And all of a sudden, you can do whatever you want. I mean, literally, whatever you want, as much as you want, for as long as you want. And so here I was, I'm a very highly trained individual with a dangerous amount of confidence, all of a sudden released into the wild. I just, as hard and as fast as I could, the drinking, the drug use, the going out. And it was a crazy time in my life. I just had too much of everything for my own good. My addiction quickly escalated.
Yeah, because you're getting used to things. You're trying other things. You need more.
More.
Do you look at that as more trying to fill your life with more things to push other things away? Like, was it a masking thing, or was it like, I just love this stuff and I want to do it?
It's funny. There's what I found in my years of working in addiction. Many people use substance abuse to numb or numb pain, push down emotions. There's another level of that where you use to feel more, to really energize, to make everything level up, and this leveling up of life. Like, I need to activate. Normal life feels like static. It feels like dull. It feels like I'm dying. And so this using to level up became, well, if I'm not going to be a SEAL operating overseas, what else can I do? All of a sudden 9/11 kicks off. Boom. We're at war. And I'm not in the SEAL team. Yeah, I'm not at war, but our country's at war.
With yourself.
Yes. And I am not ready to shed my addiction, but I'm angry. I want to do something. And back then there was this thing called being a contractor, being work for one of those big companies like DynCorp, uses Blackwater, all these contracting companies. And a while back, I don't know if you remember, Blackwater got in a lot of trouble for basically giving civilians a lot of too much leeway in what they were doing over there, and they took advantage of it. I was a contractor back then, and it was the wild, wild west. It was, you go over for 30, 60, 90 days. You're making $1,000 a day. You don't have near the amount of rules that the military gave you, but you're carrying a firearm and you're in harm's way. And it was very adrenaline pumping, making a lot of money, and it allowed my addiction to continue.
Which is not a safe combo.
This was a recipe for further disaster. And this was also, I could feel my life getting darker. When I was serving in the military, there was a sense of doing things for your country. It felt very honorable. If I were to die in defense of my country, there'd be a ceremony. My wife would get a flag. There'd be a lot of
hero.
So, yes. When you go into harm's way in pursuit of a dollar, you're a mercenary. That does not get the same reverence. You don't feel honorable. You do feel when you go out there that, whoa, this is darker. And when I have any kind of feelings, my go-to is to drink. So I had tools to cope with these darker feelings.
Right.
But that just perpetuated the spiral.
Yeah. Just pushes it down. I mean, I can relate to it in a sense of my addiction was perfectionism, and I pushed down the grief for 20-something years and rears its ugly head, which I'm sure certain things did for you as well.
I do that. Addiction is progressive. Mm-hmm. I wish the same amount did the same thing forever, but it always takes more to get the same result.
And you kind of start to forget who you are, I would imagine, like deep, like as a core individual, because your life has been this way for so long.
It is true. And there's also this, gosh, you keep thinking you're a high performer. I can achieve. But the substance abuse is eroding the inside. You begin to feel less than in here. That erodes your self-worth, your self-confidence, and that begins, you keep push people at arm's length. If you got to know me, you would not like me. So you just begin to push everyone away further and further.
Yeah, and I would imagine as that erodes, just thinking metaphorically here, you pour more of the substance abuse in to fill what's been eroded. because that's the way to feel whole in the moment.
Right. And luckily, I have a very, I have a scary resting face. So if I just stood there in the corner, nobody ever messes with me, and so it's easy to keep, no one wanted to get close to me, and that just worked well for me. And so I was getting more and more distant from others. When I came back to the States, I did not like it here. I did not like, I had a lot of PTSD from coming back into the civilian sector. I did not like that there was all these shades of gray here. There was, taxes and emotions and doctors, all these things. When overseas, it's good decision, bad decision, live, die. It was very simple over there. And that to me was the life I wanted to live. So I kept going back overseas, taking more and more contracts and keeping
to avoid being a human. Yeah, we all run from it once in a while.
And all of that, along the line, I'm doing the little benchmark life experiences. I got married. I had a son, and I'm doing these contracts, not being a very good husband or dad. And my substance use is escalating, and I'm now using crystal meth. It's a very speedy drug. It lasts a long time. I thought I was making good financial sense because it's cost cheaper than blow, but it was, I know, it was in full effect, but it takes a toll on your body. I was spiraling. My use had gotten worse and worse. And I remember the first time I went to take a contract and they turned me down. They said, Dice, you look like shit. Get yourself together and come back and talk to us. And I was just mortified. That was a blow to my ego. I just began using more. I have this picture I keep on my desk because in the moment I had no idea how bad I was looking. Today I weigh 220. I'm 6'2". This is about the same weight I was when I was in the SEAL teams. But I had whittled down, wasted away to 130 pounds. And I was just, skin and bones, telling everybody I've been running a lot. And I had this photo of me and my son at Mount Trashmore in Virginia. And I keep it on my desk to remind me that's where that goes. It is part of my day-to-day life right now, this image I have, because back then I couldn't see it. That was how thick the denial was. And the moment that of crisis, as you would say, is that, remember that H1N1, the swine flu pandemic? Yeah, that was like our baby trainer pandemic we had years ago.
We didn't learn
anything. Well, that was in full effect. And I remember being on a 3-day bender and I get this phone call and, I let it go to voicemail, and the voicemail says, there's been an exposure to one of the technicians at the daycare. Please come pick up your son, Ronan. And in my crystal meth mind, I'm like, oh no, my son needs me. Oh, I got to get there to him. And so I'm using a little more, trying to get out of this room. The wife calls, goes to voicemail. She says she's out of the area. I have to get him. Okay, I'll use a little bit more. Let me get out of this room. The daycare is calling, the wife's calling. Okay, let me just get myself straight. Okay, let me use a little bit more. And for 3 hours, I'm trying to get out of this room. And I remember with like tears coming down the cheeks, just realizing I can't get out of this room. I remember turning off my cell phone, like turning it off and pushing it under the bed and just using and hating what I'd become. Like, man, my whole life I've been trained to be a hero, my whole life. And my son needed me and I couldn't. I mean, it was, if you could hear a spirit break, it was, that was the moment that I knew that I was an addict. I was a drug addict. This was my new master. And
it's heartbreaking because you probably knew all along, but you, like you said, denial, and then it's not as bad as, maybe it's not, it's fine. I'm functioning. I have the check mark. I got married. I've done all the things. And then when you finally kind of like open your eyes a little bit more because something has forced you to do that, you realize like how
far,
how
because
far down you are.
the self-talk that had kept me in denial was, I can get through this. I have been through worse. I don't look like a real addict. All these things I tell myself, I could quit if I want to. I just don't want to. All of that, all those lies I was telling myself is all of a sudden shattered. Like, whoa.
I cannot imagine that your relationships were probably quite different at the time. And
So I was such a horrible husband, just disappearing on these binges. I was not a present father. I mean, it was,
which then becomes once you wake up to that, becomes another burden to put on yourself, which can push you in the wrong direction.
It can.
It pushes a lot of people in the wrong direction.
It could be a moment of, and it's funny that many people have different reasons that they hit a bottom and they want to change. This one just made me hate myself. I just hated myself, and I had more using to use, and it wasn't until like a month later when I was in this another messed up house, and it's 3 a.m. and there was these two young boys, 13, 14 years old, and they're shooting those little airsoft rifles at each other, those little plastic pellets. And I'm looking at them at 3 a.m. and I'm mad because they're sweeping with me. They have horrible weapons handling skills. And so I get upstairs and I pass out. And one of those kids comes upstairs and kicks me in the leg and goes, hey, freak. And I roll over and I look at him and I look past the gun and I look into this young kid's eyes. And I remember they look dead. They look like there was no innocence in this young boy. He's seen too much stuff for a little boy. In this house that had all kinds of drug use and craziness going on, I looked at him and I go, oh my gosh, this is going to be my son. My dad died of this disease. I'm going to die from this disease. And now my son is. And that, whatever that was, that motivated me to get upstairs, get up, go down to the kitchen. And it wasn't my kitchen, but I knew if I looked hard enough back then, there was this thing called the Yellow Pages that was our version of the internet back then. And I started looking through it like, Yellow Page searching for a treatment center. And I called up, a shout out to the Farley Center. I randomly picked it out there. They had a bed available and I went to rehab. That was me deciding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and it kind of goes to what we were saying about people hearing other people's stories and attaching to something really tiny that someone had said, because I'm sure you've had people look at you in that way before, right? But this was the moment in which that particular kid,
I wanted to reach out. Yeah, that kid. Oh man. And rehab, no one's happy when they get to rehab. It's like this balance of 51% of you. I know, I got there. I remember on day 6, my insurance company didn't want to pay anymore. They wanted to transfer me out of rehab, and I was going to lose. I wanted to fight them because you give me hope and you're tearing it away. And I was so angry. I was out of control. And then I didn't know what to do. They said if I had $9,000, I could stay there longer. And I was, who comes to rehab with $9,000? This is crazy. Yes, I was so angry with them. And I went to my therapist and I said, can I get a 4-hour pass to get out of this facility? And he was really worried, legitimately worried I was going to like rob a bank or something. And I said, no. I'm going to try selling my car. And he gave me the 4-hour pass and I took my car down to CarMax and they gave me a check. I'm sure they ripped me off, but they gave me a check for enough to cover rehab. And I'm looking at that check. And I mean, as I'm walking across the parking lot, a part of me said, I don't have to go back to rehab. But a bigger part of me wanted to be someone else, hated who I'd become, wanted to change. And so I took that check without even cashing it, just straight back to the Farley Center and endorsed the back of it and said, do you accept this as payment? And they took it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's big too. That's like almost as big as walking downstairs and finding the center and calling and then going. But having the opportunity to be as selfless for yourself. Like that sounds selfish, essentially, but like in the most beautiful of ways, you had this opportunity to totally screw up when you left, and you didn't, and you chose yourself. And as you were telling that story, I was wondering if you were doing this for yourself or if you were doing this for your family, or was it a mixture of both?
It was, I think that the motivator here was I realized who I'd become and I hated that person. I saw this recovery place as a hope that maybe I could be someone else. And I was scared to death of relapsing and being that guy again. And so most of my early recovery days, I felt like I was running from the disease of addiction. I was scared of it. I'm going to do everything I can to prevent relapse. And I was fear driven. It's just, yeah, yeah.
How long was your addiction journey? Like, how long were you consistently getting more addicted to substances?
I spent from using hard drugs like, coke and meth from 2001 to 2010.
Okay. So 9 years, you were
9
this
years.
person that was deeply hiding from whatever real version of you there was. And now this opportunity to kind of meet the new version of yourself. What was that like?
I didn't even know what a new version was. I just know I hated that guy. And in a way that's, my whole life I've been kind of running from the fear of not being enough. And now I'm running from the fear of addiction going to get me. And that was my primary motivator. And, that whole first year of recovery, the recovery center I went to was a 12-step based recovery center. And I kind of was somewhat aware of 12-step recovery programs. And I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are a cult. But I was desperate. I said, okay, I'll drink. If you said maybe this will work, I'll drink the Kool-Aid. Let's go. Everything they asked me to do, I said, all right. The military gives you that gift of, you don't need to just give me my orders, sir. I'll follow them to the best of my ability. And they would, some of the orders they gave me was like, all right, that makes sense. Some of them like, all right, I don't get it, but I trust you. And there was even a therapist at the recruitment center who said when I was a little baby or a little kid, he said, I never learned how to self-soothe. What they wanted me to do is go out to Walmart at night, bring a buddy, go out to Walmart, buy yourself a teddy bear. And for the rest of your time while you're in treatment, carry the teddy bear around with you 24/7. And so I was, I said, I'm a Navy SEAL. We don't do teddy bears.
Right.
They said it's a suggestion.
It's too soft.
I said, all right, fine. I went down to Walmart. I got a black fluffy teddy bear. I put a little skull and crossbone armband on him so he looked kind of tough.
Tough, yeah.
And for the rest of the time, for several weeks in treatment, you saw this guy shuffling around with a teddy bear in his hand. I didn't know why, but they said it would help me stay sober. So I did.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said too of those programs is like, there is proof that it works for other people. So why not you?
Oh, so much. I got a sponsor. My sponsor said, go to a lot of meetings, call me every day. And I mean, I went to 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings a day sometimes, called them religiously. We did step work. I went through the 12 steps and I was blown away how everything in my life began to change, and so a year into my recovery, I'm already, I'm gone through all 12 steps. And part of the 12th step for me was sponsoring guys. I'd work with other guys as they come in. Yeah. And there was this feeling of connection with someone else authentically, just sharing my experiences, you sharing yours. And I was taken aback that, wow, I'm way more empathetic than I realized. I didn't know this about me. Yeah. And so I remember wanting to do more of that. And so I went back to school and I didn't have any degrees yet, but I went back to TCC, which is a junior college out here in Virginia. And I got my associates in social services. I transferred to Old Dominion University. I got my undergraduate in human services. I stayed on and got my master's in counseling. And now 5 years clean and sober at that point, I went back to the Farley Center and I said, hey guys, 5 years ago on this day, you saved my life. Can I have a job? And they hired me.
Wow. the full circle. Yeah, that's so powerful. No, and like that, there's something really beautiful about you choosing to do the hard thing, one with the rehab, but also the hard thing of going back to school. But you were going with a purpose. So I bet that was a really good fuel, because I think a lot of people, myself included, you go when you're 18 to college and you have no clue. You're just going because you're supposed to go. But now you're going so that you can do even more
with
for
the
other
mission,
people.
with the
Yeah.
mission. And there was this huge motivator that therapist that I had at the Farley Center when I was just getting admitted in. His name was Dre Summers. He's since passed on. God bless you, Dre. He came to work that morning with a cup of coffee, and he saved my life. And I remember looking at him going, dude, my entire life I've had like M4s and kit bags and gurneys and all this shit trying to save people. He came to work with a cup of coffee, and himself, that guy was a badass. And I saw that when I started on my life path back to school, that I want to do that.
Yeah. There's a lot more weapons you have now as a human, as a fully formed human, with your degree and with your heart.
It
that
is.
You can do a lot more, a lot of good for the world in that way.
And I think it's that connection that I allowed myself to connect. I allowed myself to be vulnerable. I allowed myself to kind of lower my guard. And all of those it took my sense of being a hero and flipped it on its head.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you weren't doing it to be a hero anymore. You were just doing it to help others.
I was doing it because someone did it for me.
Right. And he wasn't trying to be a hero.
Yeah. It took my whole life, as like my life path. The way I believed the world worked was the end will justify the means. No matter what it takes, become a SEAL, no matter what. But flipping it on its head, saying, no, the means will justify the end. How we do this matters. That my whole mind was blown.
Was it difficult to accept for you that your life, you had taken this journey for so long not doing this? Or were you like, oh, I had to do all that in order to feel this?
I mean, that's a great question. When I came and started working at the Farley Center again, Dre Summers, my therapist, was still there. And for a whole year, he took me under his wing. And at about the 1 year mark, he went on vacation. He asked me to cover his group. And so I'm sitting there in his therapist chair with his therapist clipboard, watching people come into the same room I came into, like now 6 years ago, and watching an addict sit in the same chair I sat in. And I remember this wave of emotion coming over me going, oh, everything in my life had to happen exactly the way it had to happen for me to end up in this chair for you. And there was just this is what a calling. Oh, and that just released so much of like, okay, all that pain, all that was part of this.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of held on anger that you had.
Oh man,
that's good.
No, that is, yeah. It's almost like everything that I had once used as a whipping post became a guidepost.
Yeah.
In my life.
Yeah. And all the things that you went through and struggled with and had to come to terms that you chose to do now are your tools to help other people and listen to them and not tell them what to do, but help them through it and help them understand.
I mean, I had hated myself so much for that story I shared with you about not being there for my son, and that was just such a core wound and so much. But to be able to share that now and have others relate to that makes me realize that, okay, this horrible experience has value, not only in my life, but in others.
Yeah. But I think also having that experience, that feeling of just, you don't want to be this person and you don't want to do this to your son, probably made you a better father, a better husband, all those things, because you're like, whoa, like I need to rectify this and just be better. And it probably makes you more fulfilled in that way as well. I'm putting a lot of feelings into your head. I hope you're feeling those too.
No, you're dead on. And, and at this point in my development, I'm also doing a lot of self-reflection and I'm just taken aback at how much my life has changed by this new endeavor. And so, as any addict would do, I went back to school to further my education. And I went for my doctorate. And I began really focusing in on the embedded theory found in 12-step recovery programs. There's real functions at work there. And how does that work? And that became, my goal in life is, validity to these programs, harnessing their different outputs, and being able to come up with something that everyone can have access to. Because, Matt, people think of addiction as alcohol and, doing drugs, but addiction is gambling. It's, going to the gym, it's working. It's so much of so many lives. It's
Eating.
This overeating. I mean, if we really broaden the definition of addict to its fullness, more than half of our population is a slave to this, and it's hurting our lives. Yes.
That's how I felt about perfectionism when I look back. It was an addiction. It was something that and it had a lot of addictions that came with it in different ways. And so, yeah, I would agree. I would say it's probably more than half in that way. Because a lot of the things we do, we're just addicted to so much.
Yes. So that became the drum at which I began to live my life, is awareness for people. Get the word out there.
Yeah.
And I think that was
a
business, wrote a book, and
helping people that went through things that you did, though, right?
Exactly.
That was the purpose.
Trying to explain. And there was this quote by Steven Spielberg I saw, and again, one of those perspective shifters. He shared that you can argue statistics and facts all day long, and no one will ever change their perspective. But you share a story with someone, and you have an opportunity for them to see the world as you do or as someone else does, and their perspective may follow, their perspectives may shift. I believe that. That's what we're doing right now. This is what you do for a living, Matt. You share stories. You share
this is
stories.
My side gig. Yeah. No, I think I didn't realize that either, and I think certain things have to happen in certain orders. Like I said, I struggled grieving for 20 plus years, and something else happened in my life which triggered me to go to therapy, which then started opening the door to the most simple thing that the therapist said to me, that all of a sudden everything started to unravel. And I was like, I had the little bit of anger of why didn't I figure this out sooner? Because it's so simple. She was like, you realize that every decision that you've made since your mom died was out of this 8-year-old's brain, so scared that someone was going to leave or something was going to fall apart. And I was like, oh crap. Why so that's why I asked you that question earlier of was there anger? Was there because I was so mad at myself at the time, because I was like, God, you could have done this so much sooner. But at the same time, all that struggle that I had allows me now to feel fully comfortable hearing and bearing witness to other people's stories in a way that maybe they can feel seen. That's all I needed to do, and I couldn't have done that had I healed at 10.
Nope, you couldn't. You need to be the ability to receive, and the message need to coincide.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about what you do now? The way you live your life. What's that look like now?
Favorite part. My favorite part is when you run into someone, and this could be a high performer. It could be, your grizzled veteran. And when you're talking to them, you can just see them mentally. Their dukes are up. They're talking to you like, oh yeah, I'm doing fine. And this is the energy you're getting from them, that there is somehow in a defensive stance, even though you're completely harmless. Yeah. My favorite thing is after spending time with them, talking, shooting the shit, gaining their trust, to just feel the sense that they're letting down their guard. And the moment they're it's almost like sometimes when you're about to leave the room and they'll say, hey, Matt, you got a minute? And that it's such a subtle thing, but it's a moment of vulnerability. And you turn and you can see the crack that they're letting you look in just a second. I got a question, man. And they just, that that moment where you are the ability for you to be there for someone when they have a little bit of trust in another human being. Yes.
It kind of validates why you had such a hard journey leading up to it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I know how hard it is to do this. This is an impossible thing for many. They've generations of programming. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah. Do you think you would have found sobriety had that moment in that room not happen?
That's funny. I mean, there are so many people who are forever stuck as a functional alcoholic, a functional addict. And, and the one day you have one too many drinks and you fly off that track. Well, there's jails, institutions, and death. And there's this little tiny ledge called recovery you might land on. So, I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why. There must be a reason I was giving this opportunity, and I'm doing my best to kind of fulfill that. But I feel so incredibly fortunate to land on that ledge of recovery because I don't know, the odds were stacked against me to live this long, just the way I was living.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's like a new lease on life, but also this lease on life allows you to help others have a new lease on theirs. So it's this beautiful like butterfly effect.
It is. I fully believe everyone in this world needs to acknowledge the different advantages they have and where they stand in the world and ask themselves, this is who I am and this is what I have. What can I do with it? How can I use this to serve? Some of us have more to give. Some of us have less to give, but we all have to evaluate who we are and what are we doing with these tools.
I think society is afraid to do that.
It is very much so.
Yeah. I think
Very
a lot
much
of
so.
none of us were really trained to do that. And I would imagine that your kids are fortunate in this way now because they're seeing you live that and be that way. But I think for so many of us, like yourself, you grew up with a father who was an addict, right? And so you saw that was modeled for you, whereas a lot of other people did not see parents being vulnerable with each other in a productive way. It was more, we just sweep everything under the rug and we just pretend everything's cool. So you're changing that dynamic as well, just through your kids.
It's true. And I this is kind of a great place for me to kind of do a segue. I always love to do a shout out for everyone listening to your program out there. We come across people on the daily that are just natural. People tend to talk to them. They're naturally kind of a conduit for people sharing with them. They have a way about them that allows them to be there for others. I challenge them. That is a calling. Develop that. Go back to school. Get some kind of counseling degree, a certificate. Be able to get out there and use that gift to save lives because that is a legitimate life-saving ability. It's a superpower, Yeah, and let's harness that because I want to find at least 10 a year of people I can help get through some kind of pipeline and get them out in the field because there is a shortage of people who are doing this job.
Yeah. No, I think like I said earlier, I just commend you for doing it. I think it's so important and so needed now. On a tiny scale, what this podcast has done for me is taught me how to listen and listen without judgment, if that makes sense. Listen to where I don't need to fill the next silence. I don't need to offer a solution. I hope I didn't do that. But, like really listen. I think growing up, I was just listening for the silence so that I could fill it.
Yeah, when was it your turn? Waiting your turn.
Exactly. And then when it was my turn, the goal was to sound the smartest or ask the most intelligent question. And now it's like, if I have a question that, you were talking and I thought of a question and you keep talking, I allow myself to forget that question because it's not important anymore. And I think that there's something that I'm super proud of, learning the skill of I at least consider it a skill of mine that I'm developing to just listen. And I think that kind of goes to your point of helping others because sometimes people just need to be heard.
That's right.
I mean, how powerful was it the first time you told your story to someone?
Oh my gosh. Besides shaking in my boots.
Right, exactly.
Yes,
But
but it
after.
was powerful. There was a sense of owning my story. This is me. This is what
And
I
then the
did.
more you tell it, do you discover different parts of your story?
And it comes out differently every time. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite part because, a lot of things stay in our head for a long time. And now when we put them out and we start to process them, oh, that's why I did that.
Oh, I call this echo chamber up here. If you keep all your thoughts inside, they bounce around, they get twisted, and they work against you. But the minute you bring them out, you can see and hear them and go, oh, that makes way more sense.
Yes. I say that all the time. It's like in my head, everything's like these papers swirling around. And then when I say it out loud or write it, it just becomes a stack of papers that I can easily flip through and find the things that I need. And to your same point, it's like, oh, that's not scary at all, actually.
That's not who I am.
That's palatable. Yeah, no, this is great. I love this. And I'd love to ask you, I don't know, I like to ask the same kind of question. That's an impossible question. But if this version of you could go back to that version of you that had to make the decision between one version of your life and the other to either stay in the Navy SEALs or to chase your addiction, is there anything that you would want to say to that, Tony?
Wow, that is an impossible question because that version of me would not, there was enough people telling him he was screwing up and he wasn't listening, and even if I went back there to kind of like scare the shit out of that version, he wasn't listening. It was not enough pain required for him to learn. Yeah. And it's funny.
If you did, you would have skewed where you are now.
Yeah, I would. If it meant not being where I am today, then I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah. And that's so hard for a lot of people, myself included for a while, to admit that sometimes these horrible things that happen to us or we create for ourselves or whatever can bring good things. So for me, it's like, if I would go back, I don't want my mom to die, but also I am this version of me because my mom died. So it's like, I like this I don't know what that other version of me would have been like. And so it's a really hard thing to say out loud that sometimes these hard moments can, if you have the ability, you can create something good out of these hard things. You're a perfect example of that. You could have easily kept on that route and maybe not even be here today.
That's true.
But you made the hard decisions. Like, good for you walking down into that kitchen and opening that big ass phone book and choosing to call and go.
And there's another dynamic there. Like one of my gifts for my kids that I've given is the genetic component of being an addict. I believe it's a family disease. Having walked this harder path I have and showing this example of what recovery looks like, that is also my gift to them, is an example of how they, if challenged by addiction, they have a blueprint of how to get out.
Yeah. And all the people that you encounter also have the ability to access that blueprint and choose to do with it what they want. We all have this free will, so
they got to reach out.
With it, right? Yeah,
that's right.
Speaking of reaching out, if someone's listening to your story, they resonate with a certain part of it or something, some random thing that you said was like the one thing they needed to hear that day, is there a way to connect with you, tell you their story? Like, how do we find you, get in your orbit?
Sure. I tried making it as easy as possible. I'm Dr. Dice on all social media platforms. I have a YouTube page that has a lot of my videos, a lot of my content out there if you want to reach out. If you want first access at my book drop, it's at www.drdicebook.com. That's DRBOOK Dice, DICE.com.
And what's the name of your book?
Good call. It's called After the Trident, a Navy SEAL's battle with secret shame and addiction.
Nice. And is it mostly memoir? Is it tip driven?
It's very much memoir, but it's unfiltered, raw. Like it's like the character you're not going to like. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's an a-hole, and you see it looks like he's a high performer, but under the hood, he is ripping and roaring and then crashing, burning and clawing your way back. And hidden in that is this, they call the holistic change model, this model of recovery arc that you can follow.
No, I love that. Yeah, we will make it as easy as possible for anyone listening that wants to connect with you, check out your book, go to your website, all the things. We'll put those in the show notes so people can access you. I want to thank you for allowing this conversation to unfold however it did, because I think there was a reason that it did in this way.
It did. And thank you for making it easy. You're an awesome host, Matt. It's great to be here.
I appreciate that. And I am so lucky to be able to do this and to talk to people and meet people like you and really feel like I know you now because you've shared so much of your personal journey. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone listening. I say this every time because I never know how to end these things. So I'm just going to say that I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again,
Awesome.
Dr. Dice.
Thank you, guys. Woo-hoo.
Thank you for listening to the Life Shift podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift Journal. Links are there so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.